I've been needing to do this for a while. Here we go.
She loves black men. That's natural. You can't get any more natural than that. It's unnatural to be wanting to go out and date your oppressor. The race of men who put your people in bondage, in slavery. That's what's unnatural.
Now, I wanted to talk about this because this is what I mean. When you guys talk about things like this, it never makes any sense. Because black Americans aren't the descendants of Africans only. They're actually the descendants of the so-called oppressor you're talking about. Could you make a point that doesn't have to get dismantled in 10 seconds, please? Because, I mean, like, when you say the people that enslaved your people, well, the people that enslaved were our people. They are our people genetically. They're half of our male contribution of ancestry, or male ancestry, basically. 50% of the men that black people come from are white males, white male slave owners in our history. You know, honestly, it's not always even that far back. Like, I have a few fourth and third cousins that are fully white, basically, and that means that I think great grandmother's grandfather was fully white. So it's a normal occurrence in black Americans where, white people are in our families and in our heritage very closely in many cases. This is why when we take DNA tests and we get matches, family matches, we never get all black people, generally speaking. We usually will get white people as our family matches. We ignore so much of our reality just to fit a narrative that isn't even true. That's what I find so annoying about these situations. We're always lying. We can never tell the truth about the fact that black Americans aren't the descendants of African slaves only. They're the descendants of African slaves and white slave owners, particularly the men. So, I mean, you can't really say oppressor in this situation. How do you say oppressor when you are literally the descendants of the so-called oppressor? I mean, honestly, being completely honest with you, white people, as I've said before, aren't the descendants of slave owners. Always. Most of the time. Most white Americans are the descendants of immigrants. Their ancestry doesn't go far enough to reach the Civil War, let alone to reach a slave owner. And then those who do go that far, many of them are the descendants of people who were abolitionists and did not have slaves, or they were too poor to have slaves, or they lived in an area where having slaves was not really needed, or they felt like it was needed more in the South. In the North, they had less of them. So I'm just saying, you saying white people are the descendants of slaves, they are not. I mean, they are not the descendants of slave owners. And when we talk about slaves, actually, since I brought it up accidentally, but I'll bring it up, there are more white people that are the descendants of slaves than black people, as far as numbers go. One third of white Americans have a percentage of African DNA going back to the slaves over 2%. That means that they are the descendants of slaves at that amount. And there's many way below that. Now, we could just go with the 1/3 portion. And if you do that, 1/3 of a little over 60% is 20%. So 20% of the population that's the descendants of slaves are white. 13% of the population is Black American, and not even all of the 13% of the Black population is descendants of slaves. Many are descendants of immigrants, not a majority, obviously. The majority of Black Americans are descendants of slaves. But I am saying the population, the bigger population is white Americans. This is why when you talk about reparations, that would apply to white Americans more than Black Americans, because there are more white Americans that are the descendants of slaves and would actually benefit than Black Americans, because Black Americans are a smaller percentage of the population in total. So basically what you're trying to say here is that you're hating white people for their skin color, because it has nothing to do with the history of white people or the history of these white people, because many white people are not the descendants of slave owners, any more than a Black American would be, for that matter. In the case of the 20%, maybe you could say they were the descendants of slave owners and slaves, just like Black Americans. But definitely not just solely the descendants of slave owners, right? So Black Americans as a whole are the descendants of slave owners regardless. So I would say percentage-wise of the Black population versus the population of the white population, actually more Black people of the Black population, Black American population, are descendants of slave owners than white Americans are the descendants of slave owners. Because most white Americans are the descendants of immigrants. And also, like I said, they're the descendants of slaves in the same situation as Black Americans, and they're the descendants of, in some cases, abolitionists and people from other states and areas where they didn't have slaves often. So, I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios with white Americans. Well, Black Americans are the main ones with the descendants of slave owners. So look to yourself about being the son of the oppressor, and a demonic person at that, because slave owners were demonic people, especially the ones that raped people and caused them to have children, and you are the product of that, sir, and so is she. So I mean, like, if anyone is an oppressor or demonic for being white, that would be your white ancestry that you have in you that's demonic. So please do not tell me anything about white people being oppressive. Look to yourself. Thank you. Bye.